Businesses like this are very dependent. They heat every biscuit for 9 minutes. So that is an enormous amount of energy that is being used.
And they don't just heat that biscuit once, because the etymology of biscuit, going back to the Latin,
is twice baked.
Twice baked. And I wanted to ask you about twice baked, because in 2019 Boris Johnson stood with a Brexit deal that he said was oven ready. And I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Well, it depends, of course, what you mean by oven-ready, but very often if you have something that is oven-ready, an oven-ready turkey, you want to have the roast potatoes and the bread sauce, which need to be made homemade. And what we need is the roast potatoes and the bread sauce, and that's dealing with Northern Ireland Protocol, which the treaty itself says is subject to renegotiation. There is provision within the treaty to do that.
Article 13, brackets 8. But does the EU understand that that's our position?
Well, we've been making that very clear to them. If in the end they refuse to move, if they're not willing to act in good faith, then we will have to do things for ourselves. That's obviously the case. We can't accept disruption within the United Kingdom.
And clearly the government is acting as if it wants to protect the Good Friday Belfast Agreement. That's something that I believe the government really does genuinely believe. But I don't think the EU believe that the government believes it's doing that.
I don't think it's worth trying to work out what the EU believes, that becomes a rather philosophical question. I think it wants to make the UK feel bad for having left the European Union. That underpins its whole policy, and it doesn't really mind about the consequences of that. And we just have to get on with life and recognise that we've left, we've got to make our own way, we're an independent country, and what the EU wants or thinks is secondary.
Is talking over then? Have we just sort of given up on that part?
You'll have to ask the Foreign Secretary, but I think she's been saying some interesting things today, and the Paymaster General, Michael Ellis, has made a speech in Brussels today, making it pretty clear that we are, if not at the end of the road, very close to it.
And I suppose next week, as we start in that week, we may well be seeing some legislation. Is the idea that we plough ahead and we try and fix this by ourselves and don't worry so much about the consequences? Some of those consequences could affect businesses not necessarily that are importing, but that are exporting, businesses potentially like factories like these.
Well, to cancel the TCA, the European Union would need unanimity, and it seems to me that's a pretty high bar to get. And you have to say to the European Union, does it really want to punish its consumers at a time of rising inflation? And inflation in a lot of EU countries is higher than it is in the UK. They really want to make prices even higher for their consumers and their voters? I think that's an interesting, important question.
It sounds a bit like brinkmanship. And it's a strong moral argument you're making here that clearly it would be a self-inflicted wound for the European Union to whack up tariffs to try and start a trade war, even though we might not retaliate. But it does sound like we're running these 2017 to 19 arguments all over again.
Well, we can't tell the EU what to do. We have to have an idea of what it may do. And it may decide that it wants an act of self-harm. That is not under our control. But it would be a pretty silly thing for it to do. And we have to govern in our own interest, not constantly dancing around what the EU thinks or doesn't think. We've left. It's not our business anymore.